Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are heading high into the Himalayas to look at the birds of Nepal. It's just an incredible place for avian biodiversity.
It really is. You're talking about a country that's home to almost 10% of all the bird species on the entire planet. It's staggering.
But that beauty, that biodiversity, it comes with some pretty serious stakes. As a signatory to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, Nepal made this big promise, along with everyone else.
The promise to prevent the extinction of threatened species by 2020.
Exactly. And that 2020 target is, well, it's this heavy backdrop for our sources today.
It is, and that's why we're digging into the ZSL National Red List of Nepal's birds. It's this foundational document. It's not just a list of birds you see, it's a map. It shows you exactly what is threatening these species.
And more importantly, what's actually working to save them.
That's the key. It shows us the conservation models that are getting real results on the ground.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to get into the details, into the specifics. We're looking at this tension between huge environmental failures on one side.
And these really clever, often community-led victories on the other.
Right. It's not enough to say habitat loss is the problem. We need to know what specifically is being lost and what is being built back.
Exactly. So let's start with the big picture, the threats. The Red List breaks them down into about 6 main categories. The biggest one, and it's probably no surprise, is habitat loss, degradation.
And fragmentation.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All the development pressure in the region.
Of course. But the second category is overexploitation, and this is a really broad one.
So that's more than just hunting.
Oh, much more. It's illegal hunting and trapping, sure, but it's also overfishing.
Huh.
And then there's this often overlooked angle,
Right.
the exploitation of what they call non-timber forest products.
And TFPs. Things like medicinal herbs.
Precisely. Medicinal and aromatic plants. And what's fascinating is how the search for one very valuable plant can have these knock-on effects for bird populations.
So you've got these two big problems right away. One is permanent change to the land itself, and the other is just taking too much out of it.
You've got it. And then, to round out the big 6, you have, of course, climate change. That's the huge one hanging over everything.
Affecting migration, habitat.
Everything. Then there's pollution, human disturbance, and invasive species. And, maybe the most frustrating of all,
Well, yes.
bureaucracy.
Out-of-date legal protection for the birds. A failure of paperwork, not biology.
Okay, so let's put some faces to these threats. The ZSO Red List uses the IUCN categories, which are sort of the universal language for this stuff. Can you give us an example of a bird whose status really changed once they looked at it just within Nepal?
A perfect example is the rufous-throated partridge. Globally, it's listed as least concern, LC.
Meaning, it's doing fine, generally speaking. Right. Widespread, pretty common. But when the researchers did the deep dive just on the population in Nepal, they had to upgrade its threat level.
To what?
To near threatened. NT, and that's a big jump.
So what's happening in Nepal that's not happening elsewhere?
It's that direct pressure. It's hunting, trapping, and just constant human disturbance all on top of its forest habitat getting chopped up. I mean, it used to be common in the hills right around Kathmandu. Now, not so much.
And that's a perfect example of why these national level lists are so critical. The global picture just doesn't tell you the whole story.
Not at all. And then you have the real specialists, birds that only live in very specific places, like the Satyr tragopan. It's this absolutely spectacular pheasant.
And it's already listed as vulnerable globally, right?
Yeah.
VU.
It is, which means it's already facing a high risk of extinction in the wild. So for a bird like that, any small extra threat, a little more hunting, a little more habitat loss could be the thing that pushes it over the edge.
Okay, so habitat loss is this chronic, grinding problem. But what about the acute crises? What's the biggest, fastest environmental disaster that's hit Nepal's birds in recent history?
Oh, well, that leads us straight to the vultures, to the most severe chemical crisis they have ever faced.
Diclofenac.
Diclofenac, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, an NSAI. It was used widely for livestock.
And it was an unintentional but absolutely devastating mass poisoning of an entire ecosystem. Vultures eat the carcasses of livestock that were treated with this drug.
And their kidneys fail almost immediately. They just drop out of the sky.
It's horrific. And species like the white-rumped vulture were just decimated.
And others felt the impact too. The white-tailed eagle, which is critically endangered, that's CR, the highest risk category, and the cinereous vulture, which is endangered, they also face threats from food scarcity and secondary poisoning. The population crash was so fast, it showed how one single simple drug could basically break an entire ecological system.
But this is where the story turns, because the intervention was actually really swift and effective.
It was. They didn't just study the problem. The government of Nepal acted. In 2006, they put a nationwide ban on the production and import of veterinary diclofenac.
A total ban.
Yeah.
And then they pushed a safe alternative.
Meloxicam, yeah. They actively promoted it. So that strong government action, that was the foundation for the entire recovery.
But a ban is one thing. You can stop the poison, but that doesn't automatically bring the birds back. You need infrastructure. You need community support.
Absolutely. And that's where the Vulture Conservation Action Plans, the VCSP, were so brilliant. They took a two-pronged approach. First, there's the ex situ part.
The captive breeding.
Exactly. They set up the Vulture Conservation and Breeding Center, the VCBC, in Chitwan National Park. By 2015, they had 57 white-rumped vultures there. It was like an insurance policy.
A genetic backup. But the real win, the long-term solution, is always in situ, making the wild safe again.
Right. And that's the Vulture Safe Feeding Site model, the VSC.
This model is fascinating. Tell us how it works, because this is where conservation meets, real-world economics.
It's ingenious. They set up 7 of these community-managed sites. The first was in Nepal Parasi district. The whole challenge was, how do you guarantee a steady supply of safe, diclofenac-free food for the vultures?
And how do you get local communities to change their veterinary habits? I mean, that's a huge hurdle.
It is. The solution was to give them a really powerful economic reason to do it. The model is simple. The community collects old or sick cattle, animals that are near the end of their natural life.
Okay.
When those animals die of natural causes, and they can guarantee they haven't been treated with diclofenac, their carcasses become a safe, certified meal for the vultures.
It's a clean food supply chain. But where's the money for the community? It can't just be about feeling good.
And that's the crucial part. The community manages the site, and they get paid in 2 ways. First, they can sell the hides from the dead cattle. That's a small but steady income stream.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the big one is tourism. They build viewing areas overlooking the feeding site. Bird watchers and tourists come to see the vultures feeding at predictable times. And that tourism money goes directly back to the community that manages the site.
So the vulture goes from being just another bird to being a genuine economic asset.
It's a game changer. It provides this ongoing, powerful incentive to keep the entire area a diclofenac-free zone. It's maybe one of the best examples of community-based conservation you could find.
And it really shows that if you can pinpoint the exact threat, you can design an exact and economically viable solution.
Yes, and you need that level of detail for all the threats. Let's go back to the forests for a second, to that overexploitation problem. We mentioned the satyr tragopan.
The vulnerable pheasant.
Right. It's threatened by hunting and snaring, even inside protected areas like Langtang and Makalubarun.
And hunting is it's such a tough problem to solve. It's often tied to poverty or illegal markets.
It is. But the Red List pointed to a really specific and surprising link. In the Paipar area, in the Annapurna Conservation Area, they found that even though conservation efforts were stabilizing the tragopan population, pheasant poaching was actually going up.
And they knew who was doing it.
They did. It was mostly being carried out by collectors of Yarsagumba.
Yarsagumba. For anyone who doesn't know, what is that?
It's often called the Himalayan Viagra. It's a caterpillar fungus, basically a fungus that mummifies a caterpillar larva underground.
And it's incredibly valuable.
Hugely valuable. It's a massive seasonal industry. People go deep into these remote, high-altitude areas for weeks at a time to collect it.
So they're already deep inside the protected areas, inside the pheasant's habitat.
Exactly. And while they're up there collecting the fungus, they might be setting snares or doing opportunistic poaching for food or just for extra income.
So one very specialized, lucrative activity is creating this dangerous side effect for the local wildlife.
It's a critical link to understand. If you want to protect the pheasants, you can't just put up posters saying, "Don't trap pheasants." You have to engage with the whole Yarsagumba collection economy. And that is a much, much harder problem to solve than banning a single drug.
And the problems are just as complex down in the lowlands,
Right.
but with a different mix of issues.
A totally different cocktail of threats, yeah. Mostly tied to intensive agriculture.
And this is where we find species like the white-tailed eagle, which you mentioned is critically endangered.
Correct. The eagle winters in the lowlands, and it's getting hit from all sides. Habitat loss, Food shortages from illegal fishing inside protected areas, overfishing outside them.
But I'm guessing there's a chemical threat here, too.
Oh, yes. The big one is water pollution from pesticides, which are used incredibly heavily across the agricultural plains.
So the chemical runoff just gets into everything. It contaminates the entire food chain, right up to apex predators like the eagle.
Exactly. And it's not just the big predators. Even common smaller birds are suffering. The paddy-field pipit, for instance. Its population seems to be going down, likely as a direct result of this kind of super-intensive farming.
And the rufous-winged lark is another one.
Yeah, it's threatened by the same things. More pesticides and also just cultivating every last scrap of land, getting rid of the field corners and edges where the birds used to nest and find shelter.
You're literally farming them out of a home.
Yeah.
And in the water bodies themselves, you also have invasive species.
A classic problem. Take the oriental darter. It's near threatened. And a growing issue for it is the spread of water hyacinth.
That purple-flowered plant that just covers the surface of the water.
Right. It forms these incredibly dense mats that choke the waterways. And for a bird like the darter, which hunts by diving for fish, it physically blocks its access to food.
Wow. It really paints a bleak picture of human impact. Almost every activity seems to be driving some kind of decline. But the source material, the red list, it points out this really interesting paradox.
Yes. That habitat change isn't always bad for every single species.
Some birds are actually thriving in the chaos.
They are, the adaptable ones. Look at the red-vented bulbul. It's listed as least concern, and its population is probably going up. Why? Because we've torn down dense forests and replaced them with agriculture, gardens, and city parks.
Which is the exact kind of open, shrubby environment it loves.
It's perfect for it. The black-throated tit is another one. Also, least concern, probably stable. It seems to benefit from forest thinning and degradation, which encourages the kind of scrubby undergrowth it prefers.
Even a raptor like the common kestrel.
Yeah, forest loss has actually helped it expand its range, opening up more grassland for hunting. Now, it's still threatened by pesticides and urbanization in those new areas, but the initial change was good for it.
So the generalists, the ones that can roll with the punches, they do okay. How does that compare to the high-altitude specialists? Is being way up in the mountains a form of protection?
In a way, yes. Relatively speaking, those high-altitude species face fewer immediate threats. A bird like the northern goshawk or the white-browed shortwing, both least concern, are considered safer because they're habitat.
The subalpine forests.
Right. It's just harder to get to. There's way less pressure from deforestation and development up there. The sheer difficulty and cost of building anything at that altitude acts as a kind of natural conservation buffer.
So when we step back and look at everything we've pulled from this deep dive into the ZSL Red List, what's the big picture?
I think it's that the conservation landscape in Nepal it's incredibly complex. You have these huge catastrophic drivers of decline like habitat loss and chemical poisoning. That's undeniable.
But you also have these incredibly bright spots of success.
You do.
Yeah.
And they're all based on specifics. The vulture safe zones, the diclofenac ban, the targeted work to stabilize the satyr tragopan. They all show that when you identify the precise surgical detail of a threat, the specific drug, the specific group of poachers, and you combine that knowledge with strong policy and real community buy-in, you can turn things around. You can actually reverse a catastrophic decline.
And that really is the central lesson here, isn't it? For anyone who wants to be truly informed about conservation, it's about getting past the headlines. Documents like this Red List give you the specificity you need to fight the right battle.
Exactly. Knowing which bird, like the rufous-winged lark, is threatened by which specific farming practice. Or understanding the economic chain that links your Sagumba collection to pheasant trapping.
Conservation is won or lost in those details.
It really is. And that specificity leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to chew on. Our discussion showed that a huge catastrophic crisis like diclofenac required a massive top-down national policy ban to stop the bleeding.
Right, you had to turn off the tap.
But the sustained, successful recovery, the thing that's actually bringing the vultures back for the long term, that depended entirely on creating these small-scale, local, community-based economies, like the tourism money from the vulture safe zones.
The local solution is what builds back the population.
Right. So the question for all of us is, how do you scale that? How can we take these hyper-specific, context-driven local successes and make them big enough to match the magnitude of the huge global threats like climate change and widespread fragmentation? The local solutions save the vultures. What kind of innovation, what kind of policy will it take to save the entire ecosystem?